Did you say my father collapsed? Amidst the buzz of the banquet hall, her voice was the only thing that cut through to my ears. I had dated her back in our school days. We had just reconnected at a class reunion after several years and were enjoying catching up on old times. The gathering, which should have been filled with nostalgic smiles, was instantly wrapped in anxiety and unease. What should I do? I supported her trembling shoulders, and we headed to the hospital together. When we arrived at the hospital, the emergency lights were flashing, and I could see nurses rushing about, looking distressed. It might have something to do with the aorta. Just overhearing that snippet of conversation made me imagine it was a severe case, so much so that even the surgery's success rate was in doubt. Dad, hang in there. Dad. She kept calling her father's name with a trembling hand. The staff was desperately searching for a treatment, but all I could hear were voices saying it was outside their specialty, that they didn't have enough surgeons. An atmosphere of complete helplessness filled the air. For that case, there's a surgical method. We might be able to save him with that technique. I could hear the doctors catch their breath. All eyes turned to me at once. I could hear the whispered question, "Who are you?" Of course, they would ask. In a place like this, for a mere reunion attendee, not even wearing a white coat to suddenly suggest a treatment was unheard of. But seeing her crying in anguish, praying for her father's recovery, reminded me of my past self. No matter how cornered you are, if you have someone you want to protect and a way to reach out is right in front of you, there's no reason to hesitate. There's no time. Please let me explain. If we make arrangements quickly, we might still make it. As the doctor's gazes crossed, silence filled the hallway. She wiped her tears and looked at me as if grasping at her last hope. Would this one statement become the trump card that saved her father? This action of mine would later drastically change both her life and mine. My name is Leo Miller. The moment I stepped into the venue for my first class reunion in years after graduating high school, memories from that time welled up from deep within my chest. The truth is, due to certain circumstances, I had been living abroad for several years and had recently returned to Japan temporarily for work. I never thought I'd get a reunion invitation at such a time, but the thought of seeing someone I'd wanted to see for a long time made me decide to attend without much hesitation. Near the entrance, my old classmates were laughing and celebrating their reunion, reminiscing about old times. But honestly, I wasn't really in the mood to watch them. The main reason I came here was to see Ava Harrison, my girlfriend from high school, just one more time. Back then, Ava and I were earnestly drawn to each other, transcending things like family situations and differences in status. I might be able to look back calmly now on the circumstances that led to our breakup, but at the time, I was so preoccupied with protecting my own heart that it ended without me saying anything to Ava. That regret was what ultimately pushed me, who had been hesitating about going to the reunion, to go. It was something like that. Gazing at the luxurious banquet floor spread before me, I closed my eyes for a moment and recalled my high school memories. It was the autumn of our first year in a classroom after school. I think the first time Ava spoke to me was when I was slinging my heavy backpack over my shoulder, about to head to my part-time job. "Hey Leo, I heard this is going to be on the next test. Is that right?" She looked up at me, a little shyly, while holding her notebook. It seemed she had heard the rumors that I was at the top of the class in grades and good at science and math. "Yeah, it looks like it's up to here for English and math. The teacher mentioned it today." When I answered, she smiled with a relieved look, as if to say, "I knew it." That smile was so striking, I can't forget it. She was rumored to be the daughter of a company president and a beauty, but at that moment, Ava just seemed like a normal classmate. She wasn't putting on any airs. In fact, she had a slightly naive, or rather, laid-back air about her. "You have a part-time job, right, Leo? I don't want to get in your way, so could you help me study some other time?" Of course, I'd be happy to help any time. That was our first real connection, leaving the hallway together after that conversation. I had heard that Ava was the daughter of a major corporation's president, and her family was quite wealthy. Sometimes a private car would pick her up after school, and I could tell from her clothes and even her stationery that it was true. But she never showed it off at all. She talked to everyone casually, and when she found out I had a part-time job, she'd sincerely praise me, saying, "That sounds tough, but you're amazing." That might be why she was popular with both boys and girls in our class. I was raised in a single-parent home. Although my mother was doing her best on her own, she was often sick, and frankly, we were not well off financially. But I wanted to lighten her burden even a little, so I started working part-time early on. I had a vague dream of becoming a doctor in the future to help sick people like my mother, but I was half resigned that it might be impossible, and half motivated to just do what I could. From around the middle of the second semester, I started walking home with Ava more often. That said, she was usually picked up by a car. So we were only together until around the school gate. Still, the time we spent talking in the hallways and on the school grounds on the way, there was a comforting time for me. "Hey Leo, what do you want to be in the future?" "I want to be a doctor. My mom has been frail ever since I was little. I want to be someone who can support my family, or rather, I want to have the power to help the people close to me." "Wow, that's amazing. I'm envious that you have such a clear dream." Walking down the hallway, Ava murmured quietly. She had always given a calm impression, but she sometimes had a gloomy look on her face. I felt like I understood the reason for it a little now. It's not that big of a deal to be envious of. It won't be an easy path, but with my mom's situation, I think it's worth aiming for. When I said that, trying to hide my embarrassment, Ava let out a soft sigh. Still, it's amazing to be able to say so clearly what you want to do. I don't have any dreams. Ava's profile looked as if she were quietly embracing resignation. As the chatter of students passing by faded into the distance, she continued, "I think I'll end up helping with my father's company in the future. Or rather, I was raised to believe that was a given. So my own feelings have always taken a back seat. I suppose I could think about what I want to do if there was something. But maybe I thought it was better not to have dreams from the start. I just assumed my future was already decided for me." The frame called a path that Ava was carrying might be bigger than I could ever imagine. But I felt it was wrong to just stay silent. I hesitantly searched for the right words. "But you know, even if people around you decided that you'll take over the company in the future, I don't think that's the only choice you have. At the very least, you're free to try and find what you want to do, right? It seems like a waste to give up without even thinking about it." When I said that, Ava stopped with a slightly surprised look on her face. I also stopped walking and studied her expression. Ava, who was always smiling gently, was unusually at a loss for words. But if I were to choose my future on my own, my father would surely oppose it, and people around me might say, "What is a rich girl like you doing?" No matter what anyone says, you're the one who ultimately decides how you live your life, aren't you? No one has the right to stop you from trying what you really want to do, no matter who opposes it. At my words, Ava briefly averted her gaze. The evening sun shining through the school window faintly illuminated her profile. "I see. There's that way of thinking too. When you're bound by what's considered normal since you were a child, you even forget to question it. I thought I couldn't choose anything for myself, but maybe that's not true." I felt a small glimmer of light enter Ava's eyes, and for some reason, my own chest grew warm. The school gate came into view ahead. A black car was parked beyond it, and I could see a man who looked like a driver waiting respectfully. Ava glanced in that direction once, then turned back to me. "Thank you, Leo. When you say that, it strangely makes me feel like I don't have to end things as they are. You know, I feel a little lighter." "Then I'm glad. I can't really talk, but it's normal to be unsure about your dreams, and you might get stuck somewhere. But I don't think you should ever give up on the feeling of wanting to do something." Hearing those words, Ava smiled happily. It was an expression that suggested her tightly closed heart had loosened just a little. "You're right. If I'm ever lost again, will you listen to me?" "Of course, I'd be happy to any time." "Thank you. Well, see you tomorrow, Leo." As she waved, her face looked a little brighter. I gave a small wave back. And after watching Ava get into the car, I headed to my usual part-time job. I was the only one left at the school gate. Looking up at the evening sky, I felt the pleasant afterglow of our conversation quietly spreading deep within my chest. After that, it wasn't long before we became a couple. I think the catalyst was something as trivial as this. It might have been while we were studying together after school, or while we were talking about nothing in particular as we walked through the school grounds. There was no clear line, but our feelings naturally came together at some point. Ava was honest with me about her anxieties and doubts, and I also talked to her openly about my dreams and family situation. Even though we were conscious of living in different worlds, it never became an obstacle. However, not everyone around us was supportive from the start. Especially troublesome was Ethan from our class. Apparently, his father ran a hospital, and he grew up in a wealthy family as a so-called doctor's son. He was the type who liked to brag to everyone and had a tendency to look down on others. One day after school, as I was changing my shoes at the shoe rack, Ethan approached me with a group of his followers, smirking. "Hey Miller, is it true you're dating Harrison?" His followers also had vulgar smiles on their faces as they watched me. I tried my best to ignore them and answered calmly. "So what? It's none of your business." No, I'm just saying it's way out of your league. Harrison's father is the president of that major corporation, Sakura Trading. Isn't that a whole different world from your single-parent household? Saying that, Ethan shrugged his shoulders, looking amused. His followers also snickered along with him. I was incredibly angry, but I wanted to avoid getting emotional here. That's why I tried to reply in a calm voice. "Who Harrison dates is a matter between me and Ava. You have no right to interfere." "Oh, so confident, but there's a class difference, right? You're clearly not a good match." At Ethan's words, I couldn't help but clench my fists. But just then, "Who says we're not a good match?" A clear voice rang out, and everyone instinctively turned around. There was Ava approaching us from a short distance down the hall. Her elegant features and calm demeanor instantly changed the atmosphere. Ethan fell silent, looking awkward, but Ava walked towards us without hesitation and declared firmly, "We are indeed dating. It has nothing to do with you, does it? Who I'm with is my decision to make." Ah, well. Ethan tried to retort, but was so overwhelmed that he lost his words. His followers also looked away awkwardly and left in a clumsy manner. Ava let out a sigh and smiled softly as she looked at my face. "Sorry about that. I know people like him are annoying, but I couldn't just ignore it." "No, you actually saved me. Thanks." It was a short exchange, but I felt my feelings for Ava deepen even more. Her strong will and clear words. For me, it was the encouragement that pushed me forward more than anything. As I was reminiscing about the past, I was suddenly pulled back to reality. "Hey Leo, it's been a while, hasn't it? You haven't shown your face since graduation. This is your first time, right?" The one who called out to me was David, the type who always livened up the class. I couldn't help but reply, "It's been a while," to his nostalgic smile. Next to him was Robert, who looked at me with interest and said, "How many years has it been? You haven't changed." Even while exchanging words, my mind couldn't help but wander. I glanced restlessly at the back of the hall, then the front. I couldn't concentrate on my conversation with them, and I could tell my gaze was darting about restlessly. Where is she? Where's Ava? Just as I was thinking that, a whitish dress caught the corner of my eye. My heart skipped a beat at the familiar back, and my feet naturally started moving in that direction. Then the woman turned to face me. It was Ava. She hadn't changed from the old days. No, she seemed a bit more mature, and her graceful presence instantly dominated my vision. She seemed to notice me too, and our eyes met. A strange silence fell between us, as if all other voices and sounds had disappeared for a moment. I started to open my mouth to say something, but I couldn't decide on the right timing, and a few seconds passed with us just unable to look away from each other. Then Ethan suddenly interrupted. He clapped me on the shoulder from behind with force, and I instinctively braced myself. "Hey Miller, you actually made it. He looked down on me with a slight lift of his chin and a smirk. He still had that same unpleasant vibe. I glanced at his followers. They were all in suits, looking smug. This is a pretty nice hotel, isn't it? I picked it out. It's a foreign chain, so the service and price are top-notch. It's not a place you can just walk into, but it's nice to do this once in a while, right? He clearly wanted to show off his status. I just gave a short yeah and tried to walk past him, but Ethan moved in front of me as if to block my way. So, what are you up to these days? Ethan looked at me with a sizing up gaze, showing no remorse. His condescending tone hadn't changed a bit from the old days. You're a high school graduate, right? That must be tough. If you don't go to college, your job options are limited. Oh yeah, you used to date Harrison, didn't you? If that had continued, you might have married into wealth. Too bad. With a theatrical sigh, Ethan let out a vulgar laugh. His followers also snickered, finding it amusing. In the end, she got tired of you and dumped you, right? I mean, a president's daughter lives in a completely different world. You're playing life on hard mode, man. Facing Ethan, who said this so smugly, I almost clenched my fist. But there was no point in making waves here. I took a deep breath, trying to stay as calm as possible. It was true that my relationship with her had come to an end during our third year of high school. As I was thinking about that, I suddenly felt a presence and turned around. Ava was standing right next to me, and my heart pounded. When Ethan saw Ava, he continued as if he had been waiting for this moment. You dating a guy like Miller must have been some kind of whim, right, Harrison? I mean, Miller was smart, so maybe you were attracted to that when you were students. But you got bored, didn't you? The reality is, you and him live in completely different worlds, right? Ethan said it as if it were a matter of course. I could see his followers nodding in strange agreement. He continued, for the daughter of a major corporation's president like Harrison, a guy from a doctor's family like me is a better match, right? I'm free right now. So how about it? I can give you a ride home after this. Ava looked at the smirking Ethan with a somewhat calm gaze. Her eyes held the same inner strength as they did in the old days. The air was so tense it was startling. The people around us seemed to be holding their breath. You seem to be mistaken, but I wasn't the one who broke up with him. In fact, he broke up with me. At those words, Ethan and his friends froze as if they had seen something unbelievable. No way, someone muttered under their breath. No, Harrison getting dumped? That can't be right. That's ridiculous. Why would Miller dump Harrison? It seemed Ethan still couldn't believe Ava's words. His eyes were wide as he looked around at his followers, but they too seemed unsure how to react, just looking bewildered. Yes, she was right to think that. At that time, I was so preoccupied with my own problems that I couldn't be considerate of her. As I entered my senior year, with exams and future career paths becoming more concrete, my family's situation and our difference in status became a heavy burden. The first major setback was when my mother fell ill and had to be hospitalized for longer than expected. In addition to the hospital bills, our daily living expenses became tight. Although I had been considering scholarships and tuition waivers, medical school was still expensive. How would I pay for it? Could I manage by getting more part-time jobs? Days passed without an answer. I'm sorry, Leo. I don't want to make things difficult for you. In front of my mother, who said this in her hospital room, all I could do was smile and say, it's okay. I was actually incredibly anxious, but I couldn't show any weakness. If I broke down, who would support my mother? I told myself that and considered getting another part-time job. The business just kept accelerating. I visited my mother's hospital room, juggled part-time jobs, and tried to devote what little time I had left to studying, but honestly, I felt I was reaching my limit. Even when I opened my textbook to fight off sleepiness, my mind would quickly become foggy, and the content wouldn't sink in. At some point, my dream of becoming a doctor started to feel like a distant illusion. Still, Ava repeatedly told me, if there's anything I can do to help, Don't hesitate to ask. But the more I relied on her kindness, the more I felt like I was dragging her into my problems. Ava, the daughter of the Harrison family, and me struggling with both money and time. It was obvious that we were becoming increasingly mismatched. Every time Ava offered to pay for my meals, I stubbornly refused. In our school days, we often studied at family restaurants or cafes after school and enjoyed casual conversations. But Ava would always subtly do things to show her concern for my situation, like saying, "I'll pay for this," or "I have leftovers. You can take them. It's fine, really. I'll manage on my own." I deliberately pushed away her hand as she offered me money for a meal. Ava never had an overbearing attitude. Instead, she would just smile naturally and say, "I'm doing it because I want to." Still, every time I accepted, my chest filled with guilt and shame. Leo, if you're in trouble, you don't have to hold back. You wouldn't understand. The frustration that had been building up inside me finally erupted in harsh words towards her. I had originally aimed to be a doctor, but I was barely making ends meet with my mother's hospital bills and living expenses, making not just medical school, but even college seem hopeless. In that state of anxiety and exhaustion, even Ava's kindness started to feel like a burden. "I'm not going to be a doctor anymore. It's impossible for me. I don't have the luxury for that." After spitting out those words, I was immediately hit with a wave of awkwardness and regret. But it was too late to take back my words. "Are you really okay with that? Wasn't that your dream, Leo? You can't make a living off dreams. You wouldn't understand. Just leave me alone." Ava bit her lip and seemed to take a small breath, as if in shock. "I'm sorry. I can't be with you anymore. I don't think I can make you happy either." I knew I was saying something terrible, but I couldn't stop myself. I distanced myself from Ava. I rejected the kindness that had supported me until then and ended things by taking out my frustration about giving up on my dream on her. That was in the winter of our third year of high school. In the end, we didn't even exchange proper words at the graduation ceremony and finished the ceremony as if avoiding each other. The pain in my chest when I saw Eva's tear-streaked face is something I can't forget even now. Just as the air grew subtly tense, a waitress suddenly appeared. She was a foreign staff member and was rattling off something in fluent English. "Are you the organizer? Um, is Ethan here? It seems we have a problem." She was speaking to us with a troubled look, but she seemed to be looking for Ethan. Her pronunciation was so native that the people around us couldn't even grasp what she was saying. Ethan, who was the organizer, noticed and looked flustered, his eyes darting around as he said, "Uh, um, hey, I have no idea what she's saying." When Ethan muttered that, his followers just gave a wry smile. A very awkward atmosphere filled the hall. Then, naturally, all eyes turned to me. "Excuse me, is something wrong?" I said that and began to handle the situation in English without hesitation. From my experience living abroad, I could handle daily conversations with ease. The waitress's face lit up with relief as she said, "Oh, thank you," and then quickly explained about the faulty equipment. It seemed there was a problem with the sound equipment used in the hall. Specifically, some of the microphones and speakers weren't working, and they wanted to check or replace them immediately. When I nodded and gave a few instructions on how to handle it, the waitress left with a smile, saying, "You've been a great help." Ethan and his followers, who had been watching the whole exchange, were left with their mouths wide open. "Hey, your English is really fluent. Aren't you a high school graduate?" I shrugged my shoulders lightly at Ethan's awkward question and replied, "Yeah, well, actually, my mom remarried, and her new husband is a foreigner, so things happen, and I ended up living there. That's why I can speak some English." When I explained it simply, his followers exchanged awkward glances, saying, "Oh." Ethan also had a frustrated look on his face, but he didn't seem to have the confidence to brag like before. "Humph, so that's what happened. Well, I'm confident in my medical English, but I'm just not very good with terms outside my specialty." Ethan muttered that excuse-like comment, snorted theatrically, and tried to leave. But he was clearly awkward. and a strange atmosphere still hung over the group. Ethan, who had been proudly calling himself an elite doctor, just couldn't save face at that moment. In that awkward, silent atmosphere, Ava let out a small, somewhat exasperated sigh. Then she walked up next to me and spoke in a low voice. "There's a lot I want to talk about, but this isn't the right place." "Yeah, you're right." I glanced around at our surroundings. I could feel several people already paying attention to us. I wanted to avoid any more interruptions. "When the reunion winds down, can we talk outside for a bit?" When I made that suggestion, Ava nodded without hesitation. I was relieved deep down. Taking a deep breath, I gently gazed at Ava's profile. Illuminated by the bright lights of the venue, she looked a little more mature than she did back then. The light shimmering in her calm eyes felt the same as it did in the old days. And in the next moment, the host's voice echoed from the stage, announcing the start of the reunion's program. Amidst the bustling venue, Ava smiled apologetically, leaving me with just a single later, and returned to her seat. As the first part of the party was ending, I was looking for Ava. Our eyes met as she stood in a corner of the venue, and I naturally walked over to her, and we decided to go somewhere to talk. It felt a little strange that our timing matched so smoothly, just like in the old days. But just as we were about to leave the venue, Ava's phone rang. I could see her expression turn grim as she looked at the screen. My father collapsed. The words that came out of Ava's mouth instantly pushed the noisy chatter of the venue far away. Her face turned pale as she clutched her phone. "What do you mean, he collapsed?" When I asked, Ava's lips trembled as she gave me a brief summary of the situation. Her father, Mr. Harrison, had suddenly felt unwell at work and collapsed, and an ambulance had been called. The details were still unclear, but he was on his way to the hospital. "Ava, are you okay?" "Yeah, I have to go right away." Even as she said that, I could see she was so shaken she looked like she might pass out. "Okay, let's go right now. I'm coming with you." Just as I said that, Ethan, who had been throwing insults at me just a moment ago, came rushing over from the corner of the venue. He must have noticed something was wrong, as he had a stern look on his face. "Hey Miller, Harrison, did something happen?" I couldn't help but be on guard for a moment, but this was not the time to be concerned about that. I briefly explained that Mr. Harrison had collapsed and was being taken to the hospital. Ethan's eyes widened, and he said quickly, "Which hospital was he taken to?" "From what I heard, it's Sakura General Hospital. I don't think it's around here." "That's where I work." "Got it. Leave it to me. Let's hurry." His usual condescending attitude was gone, and Ethan immediately took out his smartphone and started calling the hospital. He seemed to be explaining the situation and asking them to get senior doctors and staff involved, and his expression was surprisingly serious. "It's okay, they're preparing to receive him in the emergency department now. I'm coming with you, so let's get a taxi." Watching Ethan's back as he rushed to the front desk, I gently placed a hand on the dazed Ava's shoulder. "Ava, just calm down. We'll be at your father's side soon." "Okay, thank you, Leo." The color of anxiety seeped from her eyes as she answered quietly, trembling. Unlike back then, I'm here now, and I'm determined to support her properly. It's not just to make up for the regrets of the past. Right now, I sincerely want to be of any help to her. "I got a taxi over here." Urged on by Ethan's voice, we hurried to the entrance. The door of the waiting taxi opened, and the three of us got in one after another without a word. The moment the driver was told the name of the hospital, the taxi sped off into the night. Holding Ava's tense hand, I stared at the scenery outside the car window. As the colorful neon lights flowed by, a prayer-like feeling swirled in my chest. As we got out of the taxi, I could hear the siren of an ambulance fading away, cutting through the night air. The lights in the hospital's entrance lobby were shining brightly. Still, the air was tense and somehow cold. Ava probably wanted to get to her father's side as quickly as possible, and she let go of my hand to run, but Ethan stopped her. "Don't rush. First, we need to check his condition at the reception. This way." With that, Ethan headed towards the information counter next to the elevator with a practiced air. Since it was the hospital where he worked, he seemed to know the staff and was quickly guided to the back. Eva and I followed him. As we stepped into the emergency department area, we were met with a flurry of tense voices. From the back, I could hear urgent instructions like, "His blood pressure is still dropping. Prepare for a blood transfusion now." The air was filled with the smell of disinfectant, and doctors and nurses were rushing around. "Dad." Ava's voice trembled as she found the figure of a man lying on a stretcher. His breathing was ragged, and he seemed to be drifting in and out of consciousness. An oxygen mask was on his head, and several monitor electrodes were attached to his chest, the EKG line moving up and down irregularly. "Damn it, Mr. Harrison, his blood pressure is dropping fast. I heard he had a history of coronary artery stenosis, and he's also diabetic. Now they suspect an aortic dissection. If it's this bad, he needs emergency surgery, but the risk is too high. The cardiovascular surgeon is in another operation, so what do we do?" The doctors conferred in a hurry. Ava rushed to the side of the stretcher and desperately shook her father's shoulder. "Dad, hang in there. Please, open your eyes." But there was little response, and his eyelids remained closed. The monitor's alarm beeped loudly, and one of the doctors muttered, holding his head, "There's a possible aortic dissection, and his heart muscle has taken a lot of damage. He had a stent for angina, and on top of that, he's diabetic. The risk is extremely high. A case this severe is beyond what our hospital can handle alone." The staff's faces showed a mixture of anxiety and resignation. I could feel everyone wondering, what should we do? Ethan frowned and pressed the doctors. "If Dr. Evans from cardiovascular surgery is in the ICU, contact him. Is there no surgeon available for immediate surgery?" A young doctor, who seemed to be a colleague, answered Ethan's raised voice with a troubled expression. "We've called him multiple times, but there was a complication during his surgery, and he can't leave. He said it would be at least another few dozen minutes." A few dozen minutes. Even that short amount of time could be fatal for him right now. Ava tightly gripped her father's hand, her face pale and trembling slightly. In the midst of this, I looked at the test results on the monitor and spoke up. "Could you tell me the diagnosis in more detail? Also, in cases like this, a method used overseas for simultaneously treating aortic dissection and coronary artery disease is the frozen elephant trunk technique, where the arch is replaced and a stent is used for the descending aorta. If that's possible here." For a moment, everyone around me stopped. As the monitor's alarm beeped rhythmically, the doctors listened to my words. The frozen elephant trunk. True, if the dissection extends from the arch to the descending aorta, that procedure can be effective. But, wait, can we really perform such an advanced surgery here so easily? And more to the point, Miller, how do you know about that? When Ethan gave me a suspicious look, the surrounding staff also stared at me as if to say, "Who are you?" A suffocating silence fell for a moment. "Excuse me, I'm actually a licensed doctor from overseas. I don't have a license in Japan, so I can't perform medical procedures. But I think I can share my knowledge. Would you please consider it?" At those words, the doctor and Ethan glanced at each other for a moment. Then, one of the doctor's faces lit up as if he had remembered something. "Wait a minute. You said you don't have a Japanese medical license, but could you be Dr. Green?" When our hospital was considering a partnership in international medicine, I heard that a brilliant doctor was coming to Japan from overseas. Yes, that's me. I was actually here to coordinate with the Japanese side, but I decided to stop by my class reunion first. I never thought I'd be in your care like this. At my words, the doctors nodded as if they understood. Then one of them said, "We would be very grateful for your cooperation. Even without a Japanese license, there's no problem with you advising us on the details and precautions of the surgical procedure. This is a race against time. Let's come up with the best plan as quickly as possible." In the tense atmosphere, everyone began to move busily again. determined to do their best to save Mr. Harrison. Ava stared at her father, biting her lip tightly. I also resolved to use all my knowledge and experience to help in this situation. After a major surgery that lasted for several hours, Mr. Harrison's condition stabilized. In the post-operative room, Ava held her father's hand gently, her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, I'm so glad." Her father's expression was calm, as he was still under anesthesia. The EKG showed a steady rhythm, and the doctors repeatedly said it was a success. Ava was so relieved she almost collapsed on the spot, but she quickly turned to me. Her eyes were shining with tears. "Leo, thank you so much. I can't believe you became a doctor. You made your dream come true." Her voice was trembling but gentle, with a hint of nostalgia. She must have remembered me talking about wanting to become a doctor back in the day. "Yeah, my mother worked as a translator, and she remarried an American man named Mr. Green. He was very kind. And when I told him I wanted to study medicine, he said, 'Don't worry about the money.' So I took the plunge and went to the US, and I was able to get my medical license there. As I spoke, the days I spent in that distant country came to mind. I studied hard at university, worked as a resident in chaotic operating rooms, and saw countless patients. If I had given up on my dream back then, I would surely be on a different path now. I'm back now on a request from Sakura General Hospital in Japan. There's a project to launch an international medical partnership, and I've been put in charge of coordinating it. So I was back temporarily, and then I got the reunion invitation. With every word I spoke, a warmth spread deep in my chest. I'm so glad. Thank you so much. Thanks to you, my father was saved. You said you were about to give up on your dream back then, but you made it come true, and I'm so happy." With her eyes full of tears, Ava repeated, "I'm so glad, and thank you," over and over. I gently placed a hand on her shoulder and gave a slightly awkward smile. "You're the one who supported me back then, Ava. I thought it was my turn to help you." The room, once filled with heavy tension, was gradually filled with a warm atmosphere. As I watched Ava's tears fall down her cheeks, I gently squeezed her hand back, as if to fill the time we had lost. A few days later, I visited the hospital room again to see him. Mr. Harrison, Ava's father, was sitting up in bed, and, although a bit gaunt, his complexion was better than I expected. Ava was by his side, and she smiled gently when she saw me. "Dad, Leo is here to see you." When Ava said that, he slowly turned to look at me. A calm atmosphere filled the hospital room, a stark contrast to the tense operating room a few days ago. "You're the one who saved me. Thank you so much for that time." He started to bow deeply, so I quickly waved my hands. "No, I just offered some knowledge from my time abroad. The ones who actually saved your life were the wonderful staff at this hospital." Still, he kept murmuring, "No, even so," as if searching for words. After taking a breath, he opened his mouth as if he had made up his mind. "The truth is, I was the one who forced you to break up with her back then. Seeing you with Ava, I just decided that the difference in your social standing was too great." At those words, Ava's face shot up in surprise. It seemed she didn't even know that her father had directly interfered in our relationship. When he told me that, the scene from the past came back to me vividly. It was a winter evening when I was still in high school, and as I left the school gate, a stern-faced Mr. Harrison was waiting for me, having gotten out of his car. I was almost overwhelmed by his presence, but what struck me even more was the strong determination in his eyes. "I'm sorry, but I need you to stop seeing Ava." His low, controlled voice was unforgiving, and a tense atmosphere filled the air. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. But as I looked into his sharp eyes, I realized this was not just a warning. I was being explicitly told to break up with her by Ava's father. "What do you mean by that?" I managed to say, trying my best to keep my voice from trembling. Then he, as if seeing right through my single-parent family situation, my financial problems, and Ava's position as a president's daughter, continued with a stronger tone. "You understand, don't you? Ava is our only daughter. She will have to carry the family's future on her shoulders. Can you support that heavy responsibility? If you're struggling with living expenses, you probably can't even afford tuition, can you? It was a one-sided argument. I tried to open my mouth to talk back, but the words wouldn't come out. A sense of powerlessness crushed me, and it was hard to breathe. The voice I finally managed to squeeze out was trembling. But I don't think that has anything to do with our feelings. He frowned for a moment, then pursed his lips coldly. His eyes were filled with a quiet anger, as if to say my protest was useless from the start. This is a matter between our families. It's my duty as a father to protect Ava. If you truly care about her, please let her go before she gets hurt. Please, I'm asking you to understand. He took a deep breath, as if announcing a final decision. Honestly, my mind went blank. It felt like he had seen through my family situation and my uncertain future, and I couldn't say anything back. He didn't force me to do anything further, but his words had an undeniable weight. I couldn't even nod. I just stood there, biting my lip, and watched Ava's father leave. That night, his words wouldn't leave my head. The frustration of having our different social standings thrown in my face, and the complicated feeling of not being able to deny his desire as a father to protect Ava, both pierced my chest and hurt. In the end, there was nothing I could do, and the feeling of not wanting to involve Ava just grew stronger. And the next day, even when I saw her at school, I couldn't look her in the face properly and naturally started to distance myself from her. In the end, I was the one who initiated the breakup, and everything was over. And now, so many years later, I never thought the day would come when he himself would admit his regret. He looked at me with weak but sincere eyes and bowed his head. I was only thinking of protecting my daughter at the time, but as a result, she has been depressed ever since, and I have regretted it for years. I am sorry for being selfish. If you still have feelings for my daughter, please support her from now on. I just want my daughter to be happy. His pained voice soaked into the silence of the hospital room. Ava placed a hand on her father's shoulder in concern, looking at me as if she wanted to say something. Please raise your head. I understand how you feel, Mr. Harrison, more than you know. If I were her parent, I think I would have said the same thing. I said that, then stood up from my chair and straightened my posture as if to stand by his bed. It's just that I was immature back then. But now, I've walked the path of a doctor, and I feel I've finally come back as someone who isn't ashamed to be with her. If you would allow it, I'd like to ask if I can date Ava again. I put my sincere feelings into words, as if to shake off the regrets of the past. Then Ava, who had been listening to my words, looked at me with tears in her eyes. I took a breath to compose myself. Then I turned to Ava. Ava, I know the order is all wrong, but the reason I went to the reunion was because I wanted to see you. It took me a long time and a long way to get here, but if you'll still have me, I want to ask you to go out with me again. Ava's tears started to fall, but she nodded clearly and said, Yes. Of course, Leo. I've been waiting for you. At that moment, an overwhelming warmth I couldn't contain filled my chest, and I gently squeezed her hand. Mr. Harrison, who had been watching the whole thing from his bed, looked at his daughter, then slowly turned his face back to me. Please take care of my daughter. If this is what you two have decided, I will support you with all my heart. I nodded, yes, with all my sincerity to the father who bowed his head deeply. Seeing Ava smiling with tear-filled eyes, I could finally smile wholeheartedly. It was a long way around, but I felt clearly that this was the real start. A few days later, when Mr. Harrison's condition seemed to have stabilized, I met up with Ethan in the hospital hallway. He seemed to have just finished his shift as he was loosening the collar of his white coat and stifling a small yawn. Hey, Miller. He noticed me too and gave a slightly awkward nod. Ethan, who usually acted so superior, opened his mouth, looking somewhat hesitant. Hey, I'm sorry for all the things I said. I've always thought I could get anything I wanted. And I know I was selfish and spoiled because I grew up in a privileged environment. I took things like a top-notch education and my parents. connections for granted. Ethan's profile, as he looked away, seemed to show a sense of helpless confusion. He lowered his voice and said quietly, "But I realized there are things you can't have when I found out that Harrison chose you. She's the daughter of a major corporation's president, and I thought I was a perfect match for her. But in the end, she chose you." Ethan cut himself off there and snorted in self-deprecation. "You were poor, but you were smart, and you were dating Harrison. So the only way I could maintain my self-esteem was by looking down on you. I know it's late, but still." I was honestly surprised by his confession. I never thought the day would come when Ethan would talk about himself so honestly. In the past, Ethan had said a lot of nasty things to me, and I honestly didn't feel good about it. But behind it all, were there feelings like this? "I was annoyed with you too. You always had that condescending, superior attitude. But because of that fighting spirit, when I hit a wall with my studies, I was able to push through thinking, I'm not going to lose here. The decision to get my qualifications overseas might have been partly because I wanted to compete with a privileged guy like you. Whenever things got tough, your face would always pop into my head. I was able to grit my teeth and think, I won't lose." Looking back, I had also been running this far with complex feelings. Ethan shrugged and gave a bitter smile. "So that's what I was to you. Well, I'm completely defeated. She's yours, and you even have a medical license from overseas. Hey, don't talk about Ava like she's an object." "But thanks. I phrased that badly. I know." Ethan snorted to hide his embarrassment and kept glancing away. "Well, I still have a lot to do, so I can't just end it like this. It's not in my nature to stay defeated by you, and I'm going to work on my skills as a doctor." "I see. I'm sure you'll do well wherever you go." Ethan toyed with a crumpled prescription paper in his pocket and smiled with an indescribable expression. "Thanks, Miller. The next time we meet, I'll be even bigger, so be ready." Even as he talked trash, his gaze lacked the usual nasty glint. I smiled back, turned away, and started walking towards the reception desk. I could hear Ethan's footsteps fading behind me, and the fluorescent lights in the hallway shone white. It's not like our grudge was resolved, but I never thought a day would come when we could exchange such honest words. But it doesn't feel bad. As I thought that, I glanced out the window. The seasons were slowly changing, and my once frozen heart seemed to be taking a new step forward. I'm sure that from now on, I'll still want to beat him, but at the same time, I have no doubt that he'll become a good doctor. With that small conviction in my heart, I left the white hallway of the hospital. Sometime after that, Mr. Harrison began a full-fledged recovery. Fortunately, his post-operative progress was smooth, and he showed a recovery so remarkable that the doctors were surprised. However, since he needed to continue with hospitalization and rehabilitation for a while, Ava temporarily took over as president. Actually, I've been feeling unwell for a while now. I was planning to hand over the presidency to Ava soon anyway. Next to the gently smiling Mr. Harrison stood Ava, already dressed in a business suit. As if to prove her father's judgment right, Ava demonstrated her skills to the fullest as soon as she took over the company. She had already learned the basics of management, and her reputation within the company was excellent, which seemed to boost her own confidence. "I'm managing somehow because everyone is so cooperative. I'm still learning, but my father took a chance and entrusted me with this. So I want to protect the company properly." Her expression showed almost none of the childishness she had when she used to confide her worries and anxieties on the school grounds. She seemed to be turning the pressure of being expected to be a young female president into strength, rather than being daunted by it. Meanwhile, I was officially appointed to coordinate the partnership talks between the overseas medical institution and Sakura General Hospital. An environment is being created where we can quickly introduce the latest treatment technologies and medical equipment, and preparations are steadily underway for cutting-edge procedures that are still only available at a limited number of facilities in the country. Sakura General Hospital had been seeking a tie-up with a major overseas hospital for some time, so it was fortunate that this deal came together more smoothly than expected. As a result, A situation was created where Mr. Harrison, who was hospitalized in the same hospital, could also receive the latest medical care, and he is making steady progress towards recovery. Meanwhile, I was officially appointed to coordinate the partnership between the overseas medical institution and Sakura General Hospital. An environment is being created where the latest treatment technologies and medical equipment can be introduced early, and preparations are steadily underway for advanced surgeries that are still only available at a limited number of facilities in the country. Sakura General Hospital had been looking for a direct link with a major overseas hospital, so this matter came together more smoothly than expected. Thanks to that, Mr. Harrison, who is hospitalized in the same hospital, can also receive cutting-edge medical care and is taking steady steps towards recovery. It was decided that I could stay in Japan a little longer. One night, Ava, who had been busy as the acting president, finally came home from work. She gently opened the door to the apartment I was renting and entered the living room with a tired but somewhat relieved expression. "Welcome back. You're late again today. You must be tired." When I said that, Ava smiled as she took off her suit jacket. However, a clear exhaustion was visible behind her smile. She placed her bag in the corner of the sofa and sighed a little. "I'm home. Yeah, the meeting ran late. Oh, and I had to deal with a problem with the new system we just installed, so it ended up being this late." She walked to the kitchen, her footsteps soft, and quickly drank a glass of water. After quenching her thirst, she finally let out a small sigh. I followed her with my eyes and thought of making her a warm drink. "Should I make some coffee? Or would you prefer herbal tea?" I had prepared several types of herbal tea, which I don't usually drink, just for when Ava was tired. She nodded slightly and said, "Thanks." A quiet atmosphere flowed as the water boiled. Although she looked tired, it seemed like Ava was pushing herself too hard. I glanced over and saw her looking at me with a serious expression. "Hey Leo, lately I've been thinking a lot about the time we broke up." The moment she brought it up, my chest tightened a little. That was the toughest time for both of us, right before and after we graduated from high school. Have we changed enough to be able to look back on that time now, as Ava says? Ava rested her elbows on the table and lowered her gaze as she continued to speak. "You know, when you broke up with me back then, I realized afterward how naive I was. I kept saying things like I was going to take over my father's company and make it bigger, but I actually knew nothing about the real world." Her voice was somewhat nostalgic, yet tinged with sadness. I finished pouring the herbal tea into the cup and gently placed it on the table. The steam rose in a wavering cloud, illuminating Ava's faintly trembling eyelashes. "I was worried about you being the president's daughter. That was the gap between us. But you were struggling with a lot of things too, weren't you? In high school, Ava always acted cheerful around everyone. But behind that, she must have been struggling with how to accept her position and her family's circumstances." Ava looked down, bit her lip as if to hold back her words, and let out a small sigh. I tried not to be arrogant about being the president's daughter, but in reality, I think I was taking advantage of it. I grew up without wanting for anything, and I was given everything I needed. I thought I had a normal upbringing, but there are all sorts of people in the world, and no two environments are the same. Back then, when I declared that I was dating you, Leo, I didn't think deeply about how it would affect you." She continued, her eyes fixed on the mug in her hands, as if the words were spilling out. "In fact, I thought I was saving you. If you were struggling financially, I'd help you. You could come live with me. But I realized later that I was actually cornering you. I thought I was helping, but from the other person's perspective, I might have been hurting their self-esteem and pride." I can see Ava's hand, clenched tightly, trembling slightly. She continued with a bitter smile. "So, after that, I decided to look around more. I visited various departments in my father's company and started asking the employees what they were struggling with. And that's when I finally realized for the first time just how privileged my environment was. I feel like I finally started to learn, little by little, what it means to take responsibility and how to be considerate of others." After she finished speaking, Ava relaxed her shoulders a little and took a sip of her herbal tea. Her eyes held a strength and softness that they didn't have before. Now, as acting president, I've come to see various challenges. Still, as I try to understand the employees' feelings and the flow of work, I feel like I'm making progress little by little. I'm still lacking in many ways, though. Then she looked up and looked straight at me. So, what I want to say is that I think I've finally started to understand in my own way what it means to walk through life together. If it's okay with you, will you stay with me from now on? This is my dream now. In the quiet room, Ava's words reached me directly. Her eyes were clearly filled with tears. I pursed my lips tightly for a moment, then felt a natural smile spread across my face. Ava, you found your dream. When I said that, Ava gave a small nod. She looked down to hide her slightly flushed cheeks, then gently opened her mouth. Yeah, my dream is to work at a job I love with the person I love. My father's company is part of it, but I don't just want to inherit it. I want to give shape to what I truly want to do. With you, I want to walk this path together. Each time she spoke her feelings, the tears in Ava's eyes shimmered. Watching her, my own chest filled with emotion, and I felt a little sad, yet happy. I see. That's a wonderful dream. I gently intertwined my fingers with hers, as if not to let go. A little while ago, we probably would have been too shy to even exchange such frank words. But now, having reunited after a long detour and being able to share our feelings again, we can share a warmth that words can't describe. From now on, let's chase our dreams together like this. No matter what walls we face, I won't leave you again. At those words that slipped out, Ava nodded her head vigorously, her eyes still teary. Then she repeated, "Thank you," in a hoarse voice. A time when we could finally speak honestly after overcoming misunderstandings and regrets. As if to savor it, I also let out a small breath. Good. Well, first, let's get something to eat. It's late today, so I'll make a simple late-night snack. Please do. Really, I'm so lucky. Ava, who said that with a smile, looked a little tired, but her expression seemed much more fulfilled than before. She was standing on her own 2 feet, running her father's company, and leaning on me like this. That made me happier than anything. A long, long time ago, on that cold winter day, we parted ways. We took a long detour and met again. This time, we will surely walk together, cherishing each other so as not to make the same mistake. As I strongly envisioned such a future, I was enveloped in a deep sense of relief.